Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a licensed nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach. I run Strength Guild. I'm also a lifter, powerlifting, Highland Games, stuff like that. So.
All right, we have news, we have mail, and then after the break, we're going to talk about performance-enhancing drugs. I know that's a taboo topic a lot of times, and honestly, some of the back and forth, you've been in the game for a while, it almost gets tiresome, but it keeps coming back up, so we'll talk about that. Phil, actually, let's start with before I get to this listener mail, you said that there was, speaking of performance-enhancing meds,
strength and muscle sport news.
There's
well, from what I hear, the IOC and WADA kind of came out, and with these recent pops, more and more in weightlifting. And the bad thing is it always goes back to these retestings.
Right.
But they pretty much gave weightlifting its last warning, and if they can't get themselves straightened out for the 2020 games, then they are 2020, that they are done. You know, basically you got to get yourself straightened out, or you're no longer going to be in the games.
Everybody,
so that's
right?
kind of rough.
Not just U.S. or Russia, but everybody.
The sport.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Yeah, because now they're starting to pop. From what I heard, they're starting to pop some U.S. lifters and stuff like that. So it seems, as what we all believed, nobody's freaking clean. So,
right.
And I don't know. It's a slippery slope for me. I just do not agree with the retesting thing. I think they opened a can of worms that they didn't want to open. But what are you going to do now? You know, I mean, now you've done it, so.
No, once they take an ethical stance, then they would be backpedaling. Yeah.
You can't test that sample of 50 lifters and then not test everybody again. You know, you have to, especially since you came out with it. You know, if you'd have tested that sample and been like, oh, man, this is bad, and kept it quiet, yeah, maybe. But now it's a little late. You came out, so now you have to retest everybody over the last 12 years.
You know, I was going to comment about strength and muscle sports. I mean, I remember back in the 80s and 90s, Ben Weider and the whole Weider empire, they had like pictures in Flex magazine of him meeting with Olympic officials. They kept trying to get bodybuilding in the Olympics. And I'm like, how is that going to work? Like, you know, professional level bodybuilding. I mean, people do not walk around at 250 pounds with 4% body fat that are natural, you know? Yeah. And I mean, so you might think, oh, maybe everybody would just be smaller, you know, somewhere between maybe a wrestler, you know, and a bodybuilder. So I don't mean professional wrestler, you know what I mean, like that sort of just muscular, but sort of not necessarily that different from the audience kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that never really came to fruition. I don't see how this is going to. And before I start going off about physique people, after the break, we're going to talk about runners. Like you said, how do you say that? Everybody's freaking on.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. It's just part of all sports right now. I mean, it really is.
It's an interesting argument that I've heard from different journalists, actually, sports journalists, about why don't we just let people take performance-enhancing meds? I mean,
at this point,
putting it out there. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. Like, let's explore what would happen if we allowed this. Mm-hmm. You know. Anyway, yeah, there's lots of other ethical issues that come into play here too, as well. You know, there's lots of money and coercion and stuff, and I hadn't heard that though about Olympic lifting. Like I said, to me, it almost sounds like it's going the way of bodybuilding. In that, like, how do you really have superhuman performances in people who aren't enhanced?
Yes,
you know.
And like we talked about before, nobody wants to see. You know, the clean and jerk record matched year after year after year or under it. They always want to see bigger, stronger, faster, and there are limits to the human body. And I'm sorry, training philosophies and stuff aren't going to change that greatly.
No, or nutrition, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed. Yeah. Okay. Let me toss a question at you here. This first one is a repeat question from Karen. She had sent something in the other week, and John Mike addressed it, but I want you to take a stab at this here too.
Okay.
The original question I'll just summarize, which was her deadlifts had gone stale. She was dropping accessory work because she felt like she was just sort of burning out or spinning her wheels, and so she was basically asking about should she drop the accessory work, how frequent should she deadlift, and she was given some numbers. She's a strong lady, but here's the follow-up. So just do the best you can, okay? Because I know you have partial info. Thanks for addressing my question. One of John's question was, where are you weak? Off the floor, lockout, etc. She said, I'm weak off the floor. If I can get a lift up an inch, I can usually get it to pull the rest of the way. He also said, are you pulling traditional or sumo? She said, I've been pulling traditional. I used to do more sumo, but I began to good morning the weight up, so I changed back to traditional. I know this is a form issue, and ideally I need a trainer, but the only powerlifting gym I know in the area is run by a guy who gave me endless grief for doing a USPA meet instead of USAPL. I don't need that kind of drama. I will do some more YouTube searching on sumo form. And then she gives a link to the current program, which is sort of beyond the scope of this question right now, but I used this program with some success going from 285 to 320 max over the last year or so. So strong lady. But it's not cutting it anymore. The last 2 to 3 cycles have been trash, and I've been playing around with it, but no go. Thanks so much for your time. I know you guys are busy. Karen. So she's weak off the floor. Like I said, she's having some difficulty. She's pulling traditional. Feels stale, so maybe I just thought I could ask you about your thoughts on dropping accessory work if you're stale, or frequency for we'll say an intermediate to advanced woman.
Yeah, number one thing I would just warn her against is that I don't know her body weight or anything, but you have to realize that at that big of a deadlift, for most any female, you're reaching the end of those easy gains. So I'm just wondering, part of it might be that, like, she's used to progressing quickly.
Oh,
and now
right.
you're pulling 300 pounds, and it's like, that's not going to come so fast. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to put, the amount of work you're going to have to put in per pound added to the bar is going to be greater as you get stronger, and it's only going to get worse from here out. So, you got to remember that part of the deal. It's not like you're going from 185 to 225 anymore.
That's a really good point. I mean, in the classroom, we just call that the principle of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
You can't be at 99.2% of your genetic ability and expect to make 30% jumps.
Yes. So, there's that. The other thing, no, I wouldn't drop accessory work. If anything, you'd probably start gearing everything more towards your weakness, especially since you're weak off the floor. Now, yeah, it could be a form issue. I don't know what style of, I don't know how you're built. How I have people pull, it's definitely, it's wrapped around how they're anatomically built.
Oh, like limb length and whatnot, yeah.
Yeah, and my guess is she's just short-limbed lifter. And most of the time they have weakness off the floor. Or she's a long-limbed lifter lifting wrong for her body type. So, but deficit pulls is what I'd go to. I would drop your percentage some and start working from a deficit. And most of the time I have my people work from about a 4-inch deficit. And then basically what we do, we'll do a whole cycle there. And then when we go back to the floor, it feels like you're cheating because the floor you've been working off of is 4 inches below the ground.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that I would probably start working in some pause squats and things like that. Anything that builds your strength from a dead stop in that low position where your hips are in, flexion.
Sounds good.
And learning how to drive hard. Other than that, like I said, a form issue. Like I'd need to see videos and stuff like that, see what's going on. Is she properly getting set up in a position that allows her to be strong off the floor? Which is a very big mistake. Most people just don't know how to do. And you'll get a long ways without doing that. But then at some point you need to learn how to, wedge against the bar correctly and things like that. Pull out all the slack. So, but I would aim your assistance work to that. If you're a fairly high hip deadlifter, you're going to need more hamstring length. If you're short-legged and more of a hips low, that initial pull is a drive off the floor with your quads, but your hamstrings and back need to maintain their position. So a lot of times what you'll see is people drive off the floor, but they shoot their hips. And then they end up way out in front because the hamstrings and lower back aren't holding the position that they need to against their quads. So there's a lot of things to look at that I can't totally address with that. But, I mean, that kind of gives you an idea, and she can look for it. Like if you're shooting your hips off the floor, then again, it might be a cueing issue or it might be a weakness issue in your hamstrings. They're not as strong as your strong, short femored quads. And as you're driving off the floor, you're ending up pushing yourself way out in front, and now you're in a bad anatomical position. You've created a huge lever arm between the hips and the shoulders.
Right. Yep.
And pushed yourself onto your toes. So when you're looking to drive it off the floor. So
I think that's good. Both of those sound like good advice to me. I know, Karen, if you want, just follow up again. I know that's sort of a piecemeal answer across 2 weeks from two different lifters, but yeah, that sounds actually quite good to me.
Shoot a video and put it up on the Facebook page. You'll get, I'm sure I will end up seeing it at some point. You can tag me in it, and other lifters on there will see it.
That's sweet.
Kind of give you advice.
Well, I think that's one of the best things about the podcast and the Facebook page is she doesn't have any good coaches around her. So we're here. Just do it distance wise. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. This is second thing. I just have a little bit of a rant. I was poking around for some specific individual amino acids on Amazon and different websites that I go to. I'm just playing with different things, sort of mad scientist kind of things. But I just wanted to give everyone a little maybe warning. Boy, beware reviews on Amazon when it comes to different nutritional things. Some of what I read about specific amino acids, this sounds judgmental and elitist, but gosh, these guys don't understand what they're talking about. They're pointing to people as senior, a study done by so-and-so, and I'm like, that guy is not a senior researcher. You're pointing people to, I'm not saying some of these guys are completely illegitimate or their studies were wrong, but you're cherry picking, you're pointing to people who are the most visible on social media, not the people who have, the senior person in the lab. Like, listeners, you'll hear us talk about guys like Stu Phillips, Mark Tarnopolsky, Nick Bird, a lot of the people that are neck deep in stable isotopes and looking at protein synthesis and leucine or whatever it is. So, or they'll talk about what a leucine is or what branched chain amino acids are, and some of the comments were just mistaken. I don't know what else to say. So when you read reviews about individual, whether it's herbal or single amino acids, I was just sort of wading through that earlier in the week thinking, oh, dear God, because I was hoping for stuff like, oh, yeah, it mixed well in water. And you do get a little bit of that, or it has a weird odor. It smells good. The cost per milligram was this or that. That's kind of the stuff I'm looking for. And I know that's maybe unique, but gosh, don't go on there because a lot of the reviews, I guess I'm just saying, they're amateurs that are drifting into physiology advice. Don't read that stuff because it was bad. Okay. Next up. We got an email from Sebastian. He's got multiple questions in here, so I thought we could address a few of these before we go to break. Let's see. Hi. First, I want to thank you guys for the time for the amazing show. I found your podcast a year and a half ago. I never missed a show since. I learned so much. Thanks for that. It's funny, 2 to 3 episodes ago, you guys discussed Mind Pump Radio. I used to follow these guys too, but all they do now, again, this is according to Seb, all they do now is pushing their products. You guys give real answers without trying to sell us anything. Now for my questions. I'm sure your answer will benefit me and some of the listeners. The first one, health versus being jacked and strong, the trade-off. Now, a lot of listeners know, Phil and I agree on this very much, that very high levels of performance and health are not always synonymous, right? You have to be cautious with this. So it's an interesting question. I will say this. Here's my disclaimer. We don't give medical advice. So this is not medical. These are just our thoughts and opinions. He says, I have gastroesophageal reflux disease. So he has GERD, right? He has acid reflux. Yeah. I treat it with a pill. I take daily. I also have to pay attention to my diet to avoid certain ailments. Anyway, I can't eat anything 3 hours before bed, and I can't eat close to a training session. You guys had a guest saying that pre-bed protein intake could maximize muscle protein synthesis. I've also read that on other websites. What's your opinion on this? If my daily intake of protein is adequate, basically, do I need protein pre-post workout and before bed? Phil, what's your? I know what your answer is, but go ahead.
Well, my answer to this is like there's things. The way I address things with the client is this: there are problems, and there are things that aren't a problem. And the way I define them is if there's no cure for it, it's not a problem anymore. It's just something we have to deal with. If you can't eat before bed, maybe that's not optimal, but it's not a problem. There's nothing we can do about it. So we just move on and we deal with what we can fix.
Right. Yep.
And it's just, if you define this thing, then you don't have to worry about it. It's like, I just can't do that. I'm an individual. You are different than everybody else. And it's just something we have to work around. So yeah, I think as long as you're getting, I'm not saying the pre-workout, the post-workout, all those little windows that they try to define aren't valid in some way, but they are the 1%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the big picture is get your protein and get your food in over the day. You know, if you're actually doing that, then that little 1% window thing is not going to be that much. You know, that's for those type of things. Are when you're talking Olympic caliber athlete and stuff like that, that 1% may make a difference. But it's not that big of a deal. You know, it's not enough to stress about, and the stress you're creating over it is worse than actually being able to do it. So, yeah, I think just get your food in, you know, over the 24-hour window when you are able under the conditions that your body are in.
Yeah.
So.
This will make you feel good, Seb, but honestly, back in the day, I think it was Duncan McDougall, I'm almost certain, Canadian researcher. He actually showed how long protein synthesis is elevated, and I bet Stu Phillips and some of the current stable isotope guys can really refine this, but it's 24 to 36 hours, you know, elevated protein synthesis. So don't feel like if you don't have to get that, you can't have your blood levels of amino acids super high right before the gym or immediately after. You're almost always in one of these windows, I guess is what I'm saying, right? Especially if you rotate lifts or muscle groups or what have you. Could it be an advantage? Yeah, it could. I mean, the last time I competed, I actually, I get up in the middle of the night to pee usually, so I would leave a little, like, ready-to-drink protein thing next to my bed, and I would slam it and go back to sleep. That could be helpful, and that's what one of our guests was talking about. But I agree. That's icing on the cake. That's not the cake. If you get up and you have a big plate of eggs, you know, in the morning, and you know you're eating lots of chicken or whatever you can tolerate throughout the day, you're trying to get about 1 gram of protein per pound over a 24-hour period. You're probably in some type of critical window anyway. And make no mistake, don't think, especially if you eat solid proteins or something like casein, right, from milk or cottage cheese, it clots in your stomach, again, depending on what you can eat. But a lot of proteins, they sit in your stomach longer, gastric emptying is slower. Don't think that stuff is gone in an hour. It's not. You'll have elevations in blood amino acid concentrations for an extended period of time. So whenever you can eat dinner, let's say you eat a couple pieces of chicken, chicken breast or whatever, that's going to be with you for hours. So don't fret that it's gone immediately. I agree with Phil. It's a few percent, and compared to overall average intake over a 24-hour period, that's more of a nuance than it is a huge problem. So hopefully that makes you feel better, actually. The next one I'm going to save for Dr. Nelson. It's on fasting, because I know Mike Nelson is really big into intermittent fasting. And then the last one he asked was about coffee. He said, I was wondering if you have tried, let's see, there's a couple different products here, mushroom coffee with lion's mate and chaga that enhance cognitive function and boost the immune system. I wanted to have your opinion on that, too. I haven't. Honestly, I play with different formulations of coffee. I have for years, actually. I do think adding different things in coffee is a neat idea. You can buy specialty coffee products. Back in the day, there was Java Fit. It had like green tea extracts. You could actually see I don't know if it was caffeine or some white crystals that were in the grounds, Well, putting stuff in your coffee is a neat idea, right? Actually, in the grounds, the ground beans, or in your cup afterwards, as long as it doesn't screw up the taste. I mean, I've sort of become a connoisseur with the coffee stuff, and I'm trying to always learn more, because I'm telling you, coffee tasting, it's like wine tasting. If you talk to a real coffee taster and you say, "Oh, coffee is just coffee," he's going to punch you in the nose. Just like all black tea is not the same. There's some amazing ones. There's just some other ones. It depends on the processing, where the leaves are grown or the beans are grown. Holy God. Yeah. So, Phil, I don't know what your take is on if you've heard of those things in the coffee.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never tried it. But, I mean, yeah, like you're saying, I think there's some amazing herbs and stuff out there that can help. Again, I think it's we're going into the 1% thing again.
Sure.
But I think it's worth a shot. If you can do it, it's worth a shot. And like you said, I mean, I'm kind of a coffee connoisseur now. I'm spoiled, and I have like a personal coffee roaster now that exposes me to all kinds of crazy stuff.
You bastard.
Yeah, so I can't go back to cheap coffee. It's like I can't do it. After you've had good coffee, it's amazing.
It's true. You know what's high on my list? What is on my list is, have you heard of a Chemex? It's like a beaker. It's sort of hourglass shaped. The top is open. It's a pour over. It's like a whole pot pour over. You can get different sizes. And I was listening to another podcast. There's an engineer at Starbucks, and he was saying how amazing these are. And if you look at a lot of the reviews about taste and whatnot, and again, I'll look at even Amazon reviews with a grain of salt if it's just like something about the texture, the taste. It's all subjective, of course. And people are just saying it's amazing, even better than a French press. I used to have a couple of grad students in my lab. They would literally carry mini French presses with them, because the coffee, you got that nice crema like on the top, sort of the lipids in the coffee, and just it's not even the same thing as like
we have a huge French press, and that's what we use for everything. And then I've been messing around with cold brew stuff lately, and adding things in. But I think it's fun. And the worst case scenario, you got something neat to drink. So, I mean...
Yeah. I really like coffee as part of the pre-workout ritual. We were in experimental biology, and this guy came up. He was so entertained. This was might have been the one before this most recent one. And he just thought that was the most bizarre thing ever about consuming stimulants, or especially coffee before exercise. He was roaring. This old guy, salty old dog. And he just thought that was so bizarre. And I didn't have time at the poster, and my student who was with me at the time, Grant's been on the show before. He's a biochemist, and he's in medical school now. He knows what he's talking about, but you don't have time to tell these guys. No, actually, people do as part of a pre-workout ritual. They'll sit down with a strong cup of coffee, or they'll take a pre-workout of different kinds. I prefer coffee. The benefits, antioxidant benefits and other things. My mom was just talking about coffee extending lifespan. Which is very funny, because I had just read a paper and shared it on IronRadio about how coffee seems to be related to longer telomeres, right? Better genetic youth, if you will, as compared to raw caffeine that can shorten your telomeres, apparently. So, yeah, it's just a better delivery vehicle if you're going to get your caffeine. Yeah, do it with coffee. But, adding other stuff, if it's water-soluble and it doesn't screw up the taste, there you go. I know some people are like, "Oh, screw the taste, Lowry. I'll chug down anything." Well, that's fine, but good coffee is one of the simple pleasures of life, I think. So.
Yeah. I got one more thing that we need to touch on that I don't know if you saw yet. Have you seen the Super League thing yet?
No.
Dorian Yates has teamed up with Nike and Bodybuilding.com, and he's starting a whole new federation.
Oh.
And he's the president of it. And then also on board is Stan Efferding, and then Aaron Stern, two-time Miss Olympia.
Okay.
So with Nike and Bodybuilding.com behind it, it's big. Basically, they're looking to make bodybuilding non-subjective. So there's no judging. There's no posing. Basically, you come in, and round one is what they're calling your output quotient. You do 8 exercises at a set load for the amount of reps you can do. And then the total output divided by your body weight is your output quotient.
Okay.
And then round 2 is the deltas. And basically it's your upper body to waist ratio, your lower body to waist ratio, your upper body to lower body ratio. And then the total of the 3 deltas is your 3D score. And then you add those two together, and that's your super score. and that's who wins.
Wow. So being ripped really isn't part of it, aside from having a small waist.
Yeah. So I mean, there won't be. What I think you'll see is you're not going to see the 3%, 5%. You're going to actually hurt yourself by taking those last few percent off.
Right.
Because your first score will go to hell.
Yeah. Performance will go away.
Yeah. So the first one of these happens this coming up in Las Vegas.
Huh.
So it's going to be interesting to see. Basically, they said, there are no posers and there are no judges. The opinions, biases, and personal interpretations of other humans are not allowed. Only real athletes and real metrics. These are the rules. So, yeah, it's a league of superhumans, men and women with superhuman form and superhuman function.
Interesting.
So,
I almost wish there was more proportional measurements there.
Yeah.
Like there was a talk of like the Greek ideal of the your calves, your biceps, and your neck should be the same. Like 18 and 18 inches sort of thing. I don't know. I like the idea, I guess, that it's almost like old school Muscle Beach, right? Where nobody was saying, "Oh my God, you're 5%. You're 2 weeks out. You're not emaciated enough." And then they had performance stuff. They would do gymnastics type things or whatever. I kind of like the combo, so you don't end up being all show and no go.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. Wow. I'll have to look into that.
See how it's received, yeah. So
they've tried to start bodybuilding federations before. And now this doesn't sound like it's just pro, right? Would this be amateur and pro?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So
they have a who's who list of people. Well, like I said, I mean, just the people behind it with Dorian Yates and Stan Efferding, and then Aaron Stern. But then they have all these celebrity guests that are going to show up. So it'll be interesting to see. $10,000 for each weight class winner.
Oh, see, yeah.
So
get money involved, and then you'll see some freaks come out.
Yeah. So
I'm curious to see what the physiques actually look like.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Aesthetically, I'd be curious to see what they would look like. I would think they'd have to take the measurements. With the guys and the gals would just have trunks on. I don't know how else you would do that. But this doesn't lend itself to an audience. I mean, the performance part would, but who wants to see somebody get a tape measure across his shoulders and his waist? Like, woo, yay!
So
we'll see. Wow.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So. And I'm sure, I don't know how it's going to do, but I'm sure they're going to wrap it around there'll be some kind of expo, I'm sure. There just has to be nowadays.
Sure.
But what we're looking at, 7/29/17, so it's this month.
Wow. So yeah, it's now.
Yeah, it's right now on the 29th. So watch it live at bodybuilding.com.
This might be something bodybuilding.com is doing to boost their own... some new reinvention. I'm not saying I don't know if they're lagging or not. I'm not saying that. Honestly, I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, but when I see people walk around and they've got the bodybuilding.com gym bag, a t-shirt, hat, I'm like, you're not an experienced lifter, are you?
Then it's funny you say that because, I have a background years ago within like training forums, and it was always like, the bodybuilding.com was the first step that people went through.
Right. Yep.
It was the biggest, but it was also the lowest common denominator. And then they went elsewhere from there. But yeah.
Yeah. Talk about there's some goofy advice on those forums, and as long as you read forums with a grain of salt, I mean, God, Phil, you and I both know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose it can be good for motivation, and you just have to be careful. I mean, people do start somewhere. I don't know, and I've even spoken to a few people who they've hired from a more of a science perspective, editorial perspective, that I really questioned some of what they were saying, and I'll leave it at that. I'm like, okay. But in any case, yeah, you're right. As far as the backing goes, that sounds like big money. You said also Nike?
Nike, yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, we're going to talk about Nike after the break. They definitely write some big salaries for athletes.
Yes.
So, okay, we'll be back in just a minute.
Hey, listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle. Oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book. But that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, folks, we're back. It's Phil and Lonnie. And this week we're going to talk about performance-enhancing drugs in the topic of the day. This stemmed from an article that a former student of mine, Daria, sent me. She's exercise physiology, and now she's in law school. And she's interested in some of the legal aspects of this. I read the article, and I find myself becoming enraged in parts, maybe just jaded and rolling my eyes in others. But this is about a scandal. I guess it's a scandal. The New York Times is making it seem like one, certainly, about performance-enhancing drugs among runners. Now, before you say, I don't care about runners, you guys, okay, that's fine. But a lot of these issues, I think, are also fingers that get pointed in the muscle sports like we've already been discussing. So the title is This Doesn't Sound Legal Inside Nike's Oregon Project. Have you heard about this, Phil?
This is the one where they're going to pay somebody to run a marathon in under... Is that the one?
Well, it's Nike was writing some big salaries, big checks to people, and they got involved in this sort of performance enhancement project under Alberto Salazar, who himself is a famous runner. Anyway, it's the subtitle, this is by Matt Hart. A report by anti-doping officials says the coach Alberto Salazar violated drug protocols with Dathan Ritzenheim, if I'm saying that correctly, Mo Farah, and other elite runners. So they talk about this Dathan Ritzenheim, Olympic distance runner. Apparently he was feeling sick. He was given thyroid medications, and this is how the article starts, that were recommended to him to boost performance. And that kind of thing. Alberto Salazar was his running coach, teamed up with Nike, focused on, at least as far as some of these supplement and drug protocols, revving Ritzenheim's endocrine system. Performance enhancement was not uncommon. In the Oregon Project, the vaunted team financed by Nike and led by Salazar, etc. Of course, there's different incidents involved with different people here. But this is where I started sort of rolling my eyes a little. Of course, USADA, right, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, are pointing lots of fingers, and they're using a bit of drama. It feels a little witch hunt-like to me. That's my opinion. Whereas, you get denials out of the people who are on the coaching and athlete side. But it says, apparently the anti-doping authorities, again, they're talking about USADA, in the report, anti-doping officials depicted Salazar as a medicine chest for world-class athletes on Nike's payroll. Now, this is where I start rolling my eyes. He helped them gain access to things such as prescription dose vitamin D, ferrous sulfate. Okay, that's an iron pill, everybody, right? But then it does say testosterone and various thyroid medications. Okay, well, that's not a supplement. So it says many of the drugs have no proven benefits for runners. Well, proven, not proven. Science doesn't really prove anything. It just supports something. They also mentioned later in the article L-carnitine. And I'm like, oh, Christ. That's been around forever. It doesn't get into skeletal muscle as far as I understand. They're saying that, though, they were infusing it, and it does ridiculous things for runners. L-carnitine, everybody, if you're not familiar, it's one of the steps, we'll just say, in fat burning, in fat oxidation. It helps you get fatty acids into your little mitochondrial furnaces in your working muscles so you can burn the fat for a fuel source, right? It says anti-doping officials now believe that Salazar and a Texas endocrinologist administered an infusion procedure that was against the rules. This endocrinologist, he's calling USADA's efforts a fishing expedition, and he's getting really aggressive against them. Apparently they tried unsuccessfully last year to get some deposition from him, and he's not having it. It's just interesting how he's pushing back. This guy does not seem intimidated. Now, part of the thing here was that when people went out to run on this team, right, and let's face it, getting a sponsorship is sort of a childhood dream for these people. I mean, imagine it's like bodybuilders wanting to turn pro, or I guess in powerlifting it's not quite the same, whereas at least historically there hasn't been huge winnings to be had. Not that bodybuilding was huge winnings either. But anyway, you get the idea. This is like childhood dream for a lot of people. And this is where coercion comes in. They said basically the athletes, were acutely aware that these opportunities, again, to be put on these supplement and drug regimes could be withdrawn at Salazar's discretion. And were dependent on both his favor and on their own performance. So to me, this brings up the issue of coercion, right? Like if you're somebody I like, I'm going to make sure you get the drugs or supplements that you think you need to be a pro and to be, fulfill your dreams. It's sort of that coercion, right? If you're part of the right group, if you're in favor with the right person, then you get the opportunities. So my question for you, Phil, is, do you think that happens in strength sports? You get these little cliques of people. It made me think about, you get a diet guru or someone who's a contest promoter. I know that's bodybuilding, but do you think there's coercion that goes on like that? Like if you're not one of the cool kids, you're pinched out of your dreams, so to speak?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but there's no money in strength sports.
Yep.
And there's money in this running. Running's huge. As far as like athletic endeavors, it's probably the biggest thing out there that the general population still gets pushed towards.
Yep.
So there's money in the shoes that are being bought through Nike and things like that.
Yeah, the salaries, at one point it said this one guy, his performance had ebbed, so his salary dropped from $200,000 from Nike to $100,000.
Ooh. Yeah,
painful.
and you don't see that kind of money being thrown around in strength sports.
No, you don't.
Because it's still like powerlifting is probably bigger, and Olympic weightlifting here in the States at least, is bigger than it's ever been, but it's still niche in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't think powerlifting.
I think there are people that get an advantage, but it's because they're at this gym and able to train with these people and this and that. But I don't think you get that much of a. It's not that huge. It's not like somebody can't come beat them.
No, it's true. I would think though, if you're in a gym somewhere that's very selective, like West Side, and you're not in favor with. If you're in favor with the right people, you might get some of what you feel you need. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think there's even, and I've seen it, even favorable judging as far as that goes, depending on where you're at. Oh, he's a West Side guy, and,
Yeah.
the judges kind of bat an eye, and whatever you do is good.
Right, rubber stamp.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, with bodybuilding, it's the same thing what you just said with judging. If you've got one of these guys, and some of these regional contest promoters are kind of like this. They have this sort of entourage of competitors, both fitness competitors, women and guys, and they pay the guy big bucks to put them on diets, quote unquote diets. I don't think that's the only thing he's putting them on necessarily, but even if he's not, he's the show promoter, right? Mm-hmm. So the judges, and that's always the thing you hear, oh, he hasn't paid his dues, or she hasn't paid her dues yet. She's amazing, but she needs to prove herself across a few competitions. That'd be fine if it was all performance, but I do think there might be some level of coercion there, like, if you're, again, if you're not paying me essentially to put you on a quote unquote diet, then you're not going to do well on my show, kind of thing.
Yes.
And
and that's a problem of a very subjective sport.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to say, and that's why I like what you were saying about what Dorian is doing. Yeah. It would at least remove some of that.
Yes.
Like, nobody's going to say, oh, it's my opinion that your waist is 28 inches. It either is or it isn't.
Yeah.
So. Okay. The next part had me rolling my eyes a little, too, after this whole pressure to conform argument they were saying. And I get it, right? There's a lot of money. Like, if you lose your contract, you don't get to run, you don't get to paid to be a runner anymore, so, and especially if they believe that they need these things. This next one, the portion is called A Start with Supplements. So it says it's every kid's dream to have a professional contract. So Ritzenhein said as soon as he joined the team, he, quote unquote, started taking a lot of supplements that Alberto had in a room in his basement. So, and again, with this sort of supplements are drugs thing, making them sound dirty. Oh, in his basement. Why do they have to add where they're stored? Oh, they're stored in his basement. Like, it makes it sound very sketchy. So let me ask you this. When the mass media, in this case the New York Times, when they say something about it started with supplements, what are your thoughts for the listeners about the gateway argument, that supplements are a gateway to stronger and stronger prescription drugs?
No, I don't. I mean, I guess you could have a slight argument there. Yeah. But man, you're reaching at that point. I know plenty of people who've taken freaking pre-workout drinks and creatine, and they never went any further. Right, yep. I mean, I don't think it's apples and oranges. Those are way two different things. That's like telling me that because I took some Advil, I'm going to get hooked on prescription opioids. Right. It's two different classes of stuff.
And let's face it, I mean, the legal boundaries sort of do enforce that. Like even when pro-hormones were popular in the U.S. at least, people would say, oh, that's a gateway drug. It's essentially a precursor to testosterone. It becomes testosterone or nandrolone in your system, and therefore people are going to want to move up to injectable stuff and or oral, real anabolic steroids. And I knew lots of people who, no, this was actually an alternative. Right, and I don't think
the legality, like you're saying, the legality alone keeps a lot of people from ever making that step.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So anyway, apparently things went on and said, after an unproductive season of injury, Ritzenhein and Salazar's conversations moved from supplements to synthetic synthroid, quote unquote. Ritzenhein testified it was to help with his low testosterone levels. What? Why is I'm not sure I see a direct connection. I mean, I can see the stimulant effects of thyroid, the weight loss effects of thyroid. I mean, listeners, most of you realize thyroid, you have two major kinds of your body, T4, it gets converted into the more potent T3, but the point is, that sort of drives your basal metabolic rate, right? Between the amount of muscle mass you have and your thyroid concentrations. So I could see how it would help with alertness or something like that, but I don't understand how this is going to get some runner with low T into some surging testosterone levels. But anyway, he got prescribed Levoxyl, which is a thyroid drug. It's not on the banned substance list, apparently. And then, again, I'm just wading through this article, but and then they moved on to L-carnitine, rising it to extremely high, quote-unquote, unnatural levels. Well, you got to be careful with this natural argument, you know, like what's unnatural, you know, and that sort of thing. And again, the supplements that I've seen, the problem is not that you can't absorb them into your bloodstream, but you can't get them into muscle tissue so they can help with the fat transport into the mitochondrial furnaces, etc. But anyway, they put them on these drips, 4-hour drips, I guess, of L-carnitine, because there was a University of Nottingham study that suggested that it did amazing things if you infused it. Now, again, to me, that leaves me a little, I'm not an L-carnitine expert, but you could swallow that and get your blood concentrations up. I'm sure you're not going to get them as high as an infusion. I don't know, maybe if you infuse your blood levels to such a ridiculous extent, it does get into the skeletal muscle. I don't know. But it says, even though L-carnitine is not a banned substance, the method of infusion by this endocrinologist in Texas was anti-doping officials believe. Anti-doping rules prohibit, quote, infusions or injections of more than 50 milliliters per 6-hour period. Well, I find that almost weird. You know, oh, we'll let you do that as long as they consider it medical, you know, or in a hospital, they'll let you do 50 milliliters over a 6-hour period of infusion. I don't see how almost anybody could call that natural. But, you know, again, ultimately, it sounds like there's always this, it boils down to there's some subjective judgment that this was medical or this was hospital, you know, a part of a clinical study, for example. There seems to be these things that could be considered loopholes. Now, interestingly, one of the persons in this New York Times write-up said the results of his post-carnitine treadmill test were, quote, almost unbelievable. Now, again, that's more from a cardio and endurance perspective. I'll have to look into this Nottingham paper myself a little more closely. But it does talk later in the article about how Nike had become, they'd started making fewer payments to Ritzenhein based on disappointing performance. He only got half of his $200,000 salary, you know, stuff like that. So I can see where they're trying to bring this whole coercion thing. It lists other people who also received the infusions of L-carnitine: Mo Farah, Galen Rupp, Tara Welling, a variety of people here. But again, it's sort of blurring that supplement drug line to me. You know, it talks about having muscle levels 11,000% increased. Well, first of all, I don't like percentages; they're just drama sometimes. Also, how do they know the muscle levels of L-carnitine were up? They must have taken a biopsy then. I didn't see any talk of a biopsy in here. Anyway, it just sounds like, because of the language that gets used either by the journalist or USADA, it sounds a little witch hunty to me. They're, you know, and again, all the athletes are just like, no, we always check first. We don't do those things without approval, and they are poking around for loopholes, I think, in what they can do. But yeah, right.
Of course.
So
you know,
it's like what we said about legality. If you can stay within the rules, you will try stuff.
Yeah, you will try anything you can. And I'm just wondering if this, like Nike just had their beat the 2 thing or breaking 2, and I'm wondering if this wraps around that. You know, basically they brought in all these athletes, and their goal was to break the 2-hour mark in a marathon. And they slowly whittled that down to, here's our 3 runners. And this was in May, and they barely missed the mark. You know, the guy ran the marathon in 2 hours and 25 seconds. So, you know, they were trying to, basically, they were trying to reach an unhuman mark. You know, basically something that's never been done before. So, of course, they're going to try everything they can. And it wasn't in a sanctioned run even, you know.
Yeah.
It was on a track, but yeah, I don't know. So
it does bring up the gray area of supraphysiologic, you know, super physiologic, that is, doses, prescription doses. Like, could you take so much vitamin D or iron pills that it does something?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think by mouth, really. I mean,
Yeah.
It's something I should probably look into. As a nutritionist, I'm usually focused on what I can swallow, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I had a conversation with an endocrinologist once, a friend of mine, and he's like, Lonnie, it's so funny. You talk about these little 3,000 IU doses of vitamin D. I just give people a 50,000 IU shot. I'm like, yeah, but I don't give people shots.
Yeah.
But so it is curious, though. Could you infuse so much L-carnitine that this otherwise not very effective supplement works and works amazingly, like some of the reports in here? Could you get so much vitamin D in your system? Like, I think it's naive to think I could just take so much iron, I'll have more red blood cells, and it'll be like blood doping, and my VO2 max will be through the roof.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way. But when you start infusing stuff, I don't know. Maybe it's something I should look into. Who knows? I don't know. And that does blur the line, I guess, between what's a pharmaceutical and what's a nutrient. You know, what's a supplement.
Well, even the whole natural thing is kind of blurry.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Because, I mean, like, anything of this world, in a sense, is kind of natural.
That's what philosophers,
You know?
that's what, if you read the philosophy of sport journals, that's what a lot of those guys argue. Any interaction that mankind has with the environment is arguably natural.
It is. I mean, anything that man creates, I mean, it's, in a way, it is natural. Until they ship something in from Mars that has never been on this Earth. You know,
Yeah.
You can make an argument, man. And it's not like these athletes aren't going to do it. And like we talked about earlier, no one wants to see the same thing over and over. And any athlete is like anybody in any field, you know, in electronics or computer technology. You know, we don't all want to be working on the first computer ever made. You know, we want to see faster and bigger and stronger. And, you know, these athletes, of course, are going to do what it takes to push to the next level.
They want to discover something. I think that's one of the reasons they self-experiment. Like, oh my God, like with this, if this infused L-carnitine kind of thing works from the, and again, listeners, you know, right? This isn't just from the bottle off of GNC. This is a sterile prescription level. Who knows how they even obtain this stuff? But yeah, to me, it's almost the same thing as in the lab. Like, I have always avoided what are called validation studies. Like, somebody will say they discovered something, and then there's the guys out there in science are like, well, let me see. I didn't find that myself. Let me double check your findings. Let me try to replicate your study. To me, that's boring. I'd rather go try to make the initial discovery. And if something isn't there, I'll switch gears. But you know what I mean? I do think there is that being the first to stumble across something, you know, discover something, and then the self-application of it too has got to be attractive, you know. So
Yeah.
All right, well, we're just about out of time, everybody. I know, Phil, you're going off to a big meet today.
Another big meet today. Yep. So I don't have a ton of lifters in, but we have a few, and you know, hopefully, the plan is one of my ladies is going to be my first to break the 4-plate barrier in squat.
Boom.
So, yeah, we're going to open at 345.
Hot damn.
And then
you know,
she hit.
Let's get her on the show.
Yeah, she hit 375 2 weeks ago in the gym, and it was easy. So that was kind of our last heavy. So, and then we'll go from there. We'll see how things go. But it's looking good. And this is a test meet for her. I'm bringing a large group up to the big Reebok Record Breakers meet this November, including myself. That'll be my next meet.
Sweet.
So we decided to we're bringing the Midwest to the West Coast is what we decided to do. And there's like 13 of us. 13 of us that decided we're going to go out there and just show them what's up. So,
are you yourself going to be bigger? Are you going to be able to 275?
I'll be 275.
Yeah,
I'm going to be 275, and I'm looking to squat at least 700 with a fake hip. So I'm not sure that's been done.
Wow.
And then other than that, our weakest guy is a junior that has a 1,900 pound total. So, we're going to come out there and put on a show. So
yeah, I can imagine the comments now. What, corn-fed Midwest boys, Kansas boys.
Where did these guys come from?
Yeah.
So, one of my guys is looking to squat 900 at 242.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's looking good. But we've got, I think, 5 ladies and 7 guys coming out. So
it begs a
This
question.
is the last test for that, but
I think we should have a topic in the future about we need records for what you just said. Technology is merging with human beings to such an extent. We're talking about what's natural and what's not. Mm-hmm. What's natural about having titanium in your femur? Kind of stuff like that. And yet nobody really questions it. And let's face it, it's medical. You have to have that stuff done. Yeah. But I do think it would be neat, right? Like, what if you're the first man on the planet to squat 700 with an artificial hip? I think there should be a record for that. Maybe that's old guy thinking. I don't know.
I don't know anybody else who's done it. So, and honestly, for me now, it's not like that's the only thing that messes with my head is like, God, nobody's done this. I hope this thing holds up. So
right
when I'm in the bottom of a squat with 600, I'm not worried about the weight. I'm worried about my hip staying in its socket.
I get it.
Because if things go wrong, it's not going to be a little bit wrong. So.
Yeah, right. No, that's true. Get trusted spotters or warn the spotters in advance. Yeah,
it'll be it's a fun time. But I'm definitely one of those people that is like you talk about often. I think the perfect place to be is somewhere between natural and new. So there's this, not everything natural is great, and not everything new is horrible. So, I mean, literally, I would not be doing what I am doing now without our amazing, medical world.
Right, technology. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
All right.
We'll catch up with everyone next week.
Yep. Catch you later.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry. And they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.